Okay, I think we are live now. So good afternoon and good morning or good evening, wherever you may be. And welcome everyone to Qatar Research, Development and Innovation Council's webinar on fostering innovation ecosystems, a global perspective, which is a part of our Spotlight On series of discussions. My name is Omar Al-Ansari, and I'm the Secretary General of the QRDI Council. This is a topic that is very close to our hearts at the Council and an area that we are closely stewarding and studying. Qatar has been driving towards a knowledge-based economy as articulated in our National Vision 2030, and an economy that is characterized by innovation. So as a council, we've developed and are implementing a national strategy for innovation and scientific research. And one of the core elements of the strategy is to further develop our innovation ecosystem, boosting innovation capabilities across the board, increasing business R&D activities, strengthening scientific research, and developing economic competitiveness over the long run, and contributing to addressing some of the global challenges we face. So it is our honor to have with us today representatives from 4 countries, all of whom take up spots in the top 10 rankings of the Global Innovation Index. These 4 countries, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, have become global leaders in innovation and scientific research, partly due to systematic and continuous support the governments of these countries have provided to their innovation and research ecosystems consistently over the past decades. And so as we continue to embark on our journey here in Qatar, and as other countries as well look to either develop or advance their innovation ecosystems, we are really excited to learn from each other's the experiences of our journeys and to share that knowledge with each other in this platform. So to introduce the panelists, I'm humbled today to be in the presence of 4 representatives from these ecosystems. Professor Lotek Singh is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Research Foundation. He was previously the Managing Director of A-STAR, the founding principal of Republic Polytechnique, as well as the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering in the National University of Singapore. Professor Lotek Singh is also a Fellow of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering and an International Fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering, UK. With us as well is Dr. Alysia Greeted, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Knowledge Transfer Network, KTN. Previously, Alysia was Global Director of Research Engagement at Heriot-Watt University, and prior to that, led the Newton Fund Delivery Team at the UK's Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Alysia is no stranger to working outside the UK as well, and was the founder and director of Research Council UK India, and then she went on to become the director of Research Council UK China in Beijing. Alysia is a fellow of the Institution of Engineering and Technology and a representative on the UK government's Jet Zero Council. With us as well, Mr. Andrei Kudelski, who is the chairman and CEO of Kudelski Group and is the president of InnoSuisse, the Swiss Federal Agency for Innovation, and vice chairman of the Swiss American Chamber of Commerce. He sits on the supervisory board of Publicis Group and on the strategic advisory board of École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. André has served on several boards, including Nestlé, HSBC Private Banking Holdings, and Airport International de Genève. With us as well from Sweden is Dr. Fredrik Horsted, who is responsible for international collaboration at Vinnova, the agency responsible for driving innovation in Sweden. He's also a board member of the European Innovation Council at the European Commission. In addition, he serves as a member on multiple boards in private and public organizations. He has held leading roles in several societal sectors and been an academic vice president, CEO, and president for a research technology organization and deputy CEO for a privately held company. I'd like to welcome you all here today. Thank you to the panelists and thank you to the audience for joining us. In this panel, we will start with some opening remarks from each of our panelists before moving into some group conversation. Throughout, I would encourage our audience to send through questions they may have. There is a Q&A button in Zoom that you can use to post your questions, and we will aim to address at least some of these questions, time permitting, in our session today. And as for our panelists, please feel free to jump in with your comments. This is a dynamic, or meant to be a dynamic, conversation. But if you want to get my attention further, we also have the raise the hand feature that is available on Zoom as well. So do feel free to jump in at any time in this conversation. Let me kickstart the conversation by asking each of you to introduce their organization and key thoughts towards the topic of innovation ecosystems based on your experience. There was a bit of reverberation, so I'll just say that again. If we can start the conversation by asking each of the panel members to introduce their organization and key thoughts towards the topic of innovation ecosystems based on your experience. And I'll start with you, Alysia.
Morning, well, afternoon, evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And firstly, thank you to everyone joining. Also to the other panelists, it's a pleasure to be sitting on this Zoom meeting with these great panelists, but also to you, Omar, Hind, and all our colleagues in Qatar. I think bringing people together across these, international boundaries and discussing this type of topic is absolutely critical for all of us. So really, thank you. You said, Omar, in your introduction that this topic, fostering innovation ecosystems and the global perspective, was close to your heart. The first thing I would say is it's absolutely, for me, completely innate, really close to my heart. And throughout my whole career, that's been the driving force, really, is working together across all types of boundaries. So I'll tell you a little bit about KTN first. So some of you know KTN actually, but I'll just give you a brief overview and happy to take questions. At KTN, we are all about creating diverse connections with the purpose of driving innovation. So what we are doing, we're connecting businesses to new partners. That could be other businesses, academia, funders, investors, policymakers, and we're also creating wider innovation communities. So our whole purpose is connecting for positive change. And when we measure our impact, we are measuring economic impact, but we've also, when we introduced our new strategy last year, we wanted to think much more about the impact we have on society and the environment. And today, I'm sitting here in Edinburgh, and an hour drive away is Glasgow, where we have COP26. So one of the messages that's really strong for me is to think about not just economic impact, but the wider impact we have on society and the environment. So KTN is a national capability. We work right across a very diverse innovation ecosystem, both nationally in the UK and also globally. We have a team of around 220 people. And really importantly, again, they're based across the UK. They're in different parts of the UK, and 30 of those people are specifically aligned to regional, local activities. And our staff, our people, are fundamental to us and what we do. So people are absolutely core to KTN. And our staff have a wide range of expertise across sectors, from the creative industries to quantum. But really importantly, they understand the expertise of the community, the network that they're working within. And our network, the KTN network, is what makes, it's what's most powerful about what we do, and the diversity of that network as well. So we have a network of around, it's about 46,000 organisations. That's about 250,000 people. And what we do, we're not LinkedIn. We want to create intelligent connections, really understand the people and the companies and the academics we are working with. So about half of the introductions, the connections that we are making, about half of those end up in true collaborations with people working together on funding or a product. And we know the companies that engage with KTN, we have evidence that they then spend and invest more on R&D, they do more on innovation, and they reach their innovation outcomes faster. And last year, we're talking globally today, last year we launched something called our KTN Global Alliance, and I can talk a bit more about that, but I just wanted to make it very clear that our international work is very important to us, and we've just set up 3 offices across Africa. So just to close on thoughts, as you said in the introduction, Omar, I've spent my whole career working across research and innovation funding and in policy, both in the UK and overseas. And I think the theme that emerges strongly in all the successful activities I've seen, all of them, is that focus on collaboration. And really importantly, and I mean this genuinely, not just because it's the topic today, but connecting right across the system. So that's working at a systems level, it's working at organisation level, and then individuals as well. And it's making it easy and encouraging and rewarding collaboration in that way of working. So today's a brilliant example of that, and I'm really pleased to the discussions we're going to have. So thank you again, Omar and colleagues.
Thank you, Alysia, for that introduction. And we'll switch over to Mr. Andrei Kudelski. Andrei, please go ahead.
So thank you, Omar, and it's really a pleasure to share in this group the different concepts regarding how to boost innovation. So first, as a president of InnoSwiss, it's a new agency that has been established in 2017, and that is a successor of the CTI that was an innovation agency that was active for about 75 years in Switzerland. And one of the interesting elements is the Parliament has decided to recreate a new agency that has the possibility not only to really encourage innovation at the national level, but an agency that would be able to also go international. And one of the key elements that we have seen is that innovation has no boundaries. So fundamentally, to think if you really want to innovate, you should really think outside of the box. And the box may have multiple factors. It may be global, it may be cross-sector, it may be cross different type of entities. And fundamentally, as InnoSwiss, we are trying to give access to private companies or to people in the society to academic research. And one of the benefits of the agency is to give a reward to academics to work with others. And the interesting element is that innovation is not limited to, for example, science and technology. And one of the key approach that we have in Switzerland is to really consider that a bottom-up approach is something very important. Said in a different way, to give the opportunity, if you have great idea, to be able to make the different actors that are interested to make this new idea real, to give them the possibility to make it happen. But it's not to say that we have not some specific team top-down that can be complementary to the ones that are bottom-up. I give you an example, question regarding energy, question regarding how to say digitalization. But to take as a first example, the question of energy and I would say climate change. One of the elements we need to think is that a local problem or a global problem. I personally am convinced that we are talking about something that is in a way very global. And if it's very global, we should think how with a given effort or with a given number of dollars, you can get the best impact. And here, innovation can help quite a lot. If we can use that as a way to spread new technologies in order to get the maximum impact, it's something that is really making sense. Now, if I'm looking at the overall international cooperation, we have seen with the COVID crisis that even the most powerful country on earth were not able to do alone some things. So they have been collaborating. Take the example of United States that have collaborated with Germany for the Pfizer-BioNTech solution, but that's just one example of what we are seeing now. So one element that I'm really very interested as head of the industries is to fundamentally create this network of collaboration, but where it's not just a collaboration on paper, but allowing partners all over the world to be able to find new approach for collaborating in a way that new idea can be made real. And don't forget that when you look at such an ecosystem, it's not something that you can define on paper. You need to have the possibility to interact and to interact in a very flexible way. And if I'm taking the example of this conference, it's one of the perfect examples where you may have people all over the world that can interact in a way that is not only informal, but also that is allowing you to think outside of the box. So that are the few elements I was interested to share with you as just as an appetizer. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre, for your introduction. And switching over to Dr. Frederick Horstedt. Frederick, give us your introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. I will for sure do that, but it's hard, I can tell you, because a lot of very important things have already been said by Andre and Alysia. So I was thinking about what I would say that can complement their views. And I think I can complement it. I will add to what you have already built. And from a Swedish perspective, I would say that the main driver of innovation currently is the transition towards sustainable society. And I think that is the one key aspect of any country's innovation system, that you can gather around common challenges. We see that there are a lot of important incidents that need to happen, like climate neutrality or the transition to green energy. We have clean oceans and water. We have a need to significantly increase the resource productivity of industrial value chains. To do less from more is one important step we need to take to complete the sustainability transition. There are other themes as well. I think we know them all. Circularity of resources, bringing waste from industry value chains to valuable input again, or the use of biomaterials, or the need for consumer attitudes to change. So the overall challenge of the Swedish innovation ecosystem are the sustainability transition and the possibility for all actors to gather around central themes that contributes to this transition is one of the main qualities of the Swedish system. There are two other qualities that I would like to bring to the table, and there is also a challenge, but I start with the two additions. The addition number one is to work across societal sectors. That means the ability for any country to work across government, governmental authorities, academia, research and technology organization, civic society, and business. To work seamlessly and in a common way across societal sector is the second success condition, I would say. The third success condition is to work multidisciplinary across subject matter areas. You tend to think of academic subject matter areas, and that's fine. We need to work across chemistry, across physics, and across social sciences and humanities to succeed. But we also need to share experiences and ways of working across disciplines. So these three themes, I think, is a strength of Sweden and should be a strength for any innovation ecosystem in any country, to work challenge-driven across societal sectors and multidisciplinary. And then there are some challenges in Sweden as well. We may stand out as innovative, but in fact, we are not fully rigged for driving innovation that is directed towards system change and the sustainability transition as a system change. Our innovation ecosystem has been developed by addressing smaller parts, and we are quite specialized. So a main task for us moving forward is to be more coordinated, and we must strive hard to work with a standpoint in a holistic view, and then start our collaboration from there. I will return to this later on in the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frederick. I appreciate that. And we'll switch over to Professor Lotek Singh from Singapore Tech. Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Omar, for inviting me to this panel to be amongst very distinguished colleagues from many different countries. Sharing Singapore's perspective, I think the first and starting point must be to realize that Singapore is actually a very young nation compared to the other jurisdiction that my colleagues come from, Sweden, UK, Switzerland. We are actually no more than 55, 56 years old. And our science ecosystem is even younger. We've invested seriously in science and technology only from 1991. So it's only about 30 years. And that is because we have a belief that, that science and technology will be a key pillar in the development of Singapore. So I would say that, in the last 30 years, we have built a very, very sound and vibrant, science and technology knowledge ecosystem that allows us now to move on to see how we can actually translate it and whether we can actually support innovation processes to support enterprises. I must say that, in the evolution of our strategies from 1991, we have transited from one which is solely premised on supporting our economic narrative to one that uses science and technology to address some of the key issues that we have to address moving forward to ensure that Singapore grows sustainably. And as we move forward, a lot of the things that we have ambitions on is aligned with what my colleague Frederick talks about. A lot of what the processes and ideas that Andre and Alysia has put forward. Right? But Singapore is a very peculiar situation in that we are not only small in terms of population number, but we're also small in physical sciences. And with that perspective in view, right, the strategies we approach to build ourselves into an innovation, knowledge-based economy has to take a slight different approach. For us, our idea is that we need to be anchored in very core technology areas that we invested in, and whatever invested in, we must do it well. But beyond that, we need to partner. And in partnering, we look to like-minded friends across the world, whether it is countries, agencies, or companies. If you look at Singapore's development, we have been progressing very well because of foreign direct investments, but we have ambitions also to build our own industry sector. And moving forward, as we grow ourselves, we need to ensure that we grow ourselves in a very sustainable manner, as shared by Frederick. We have to be conscious of the environment. We have to be conscious of the circularity, ensuring that we leave this place a better world for the future generations. Right. So I would say for us, the key is a strong base in science and a realization that whatever we do going forward needs to be advanced in partnership with friends, colleagues globally, be it with companies, be it agencies, be it NGOs. So I would say that that drives basically the strategic approach that we have taken to our science and tech ecosystem. I will stop here and quite willing to share more as we progress in our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tek, for that introduction. And so in keeping with this concept of ecosystem, it seems as though the word ecosystem and innovation seem to go hand in hand, as if one can't be achieved without the other. And so in keeping with that concept of ecosystem and maybe demystifying maybe to the audience a little bit, when we say ecosystem, what do we actually mean? And switching over to you, Alysia, you mentioned working across the ecosystem, focusing on collaboration and making connections right across the system level. And the system comprises many components. For you, Alysia, what does that really mean in terms of creating those connections? What are these pieces that we do need to connect, most importantly for you?
Yes, it's a great question, and I think this has come out with the introductions that we've just heard. So in the UK, people are always complaining about the ecosystem being too complex, and I think you can use the word complex or you can use the word diverse, and diverse is a positive word. What we need is lots of different ideas to create great innovation. So you do need a complex system, and I'll get to what that means. You need to be working across different disciplines, different sectors. You need to be working across government, business, academia, and also investors, for example, so the wider system. And then you also need to be creating an environment that allows people to understand what those different connections are, how to access those different connections. So the complexity, in a way, you need that, because you don't get great ideas unless you have lots of different people, different thoughts, different ways of viewing things coming together. However, the complexity, on the other hand, then creates the potential for confusion. If you're a business, if you're an academic, who do you go to? Who do you talk to? And I think everyone mentioned, we have to be bringing together that system, and that to me is really important. How do you support the businesses? How do you support the academics? How do you create, whether it's an event, whether it's a process, whether it's a system, to bring together all those organizations and people so that they can progress innovation? And the type of sort of features I think are really important, again, this was said by all the speakers, is firstly having really clear challenges that people are brought into. So if you could get society to buy into that, and definitely government, business, academia buying into those challenges is really important. And then having ways to connect the system, and I can talk more about how we do that as KTN. So, and this is an example of one now, but bringing people together so that they can build those connections, but then also having incentives and measures so that you encourage individuals to be able to build those connections. That's a lot I've covered there, and I can give some examples later, but Frederick's got his hand up.
Go ahead, Frederick.
Yes, thanks so much, and thank you very much for the insightful additions, Tek and Alysia. I now realize that I was perhaps a bit hasty in the beginning. I jumped straight to the core and delineated 3 key aspects of innovation ecosystem: targeting common challenges, working smoothly across societal sectors and across subject matter disciplines. But I was a bit hasty, so I didn't tell you what I believe an innovation ecosystem is. And I think the definition that Alysia brings forward, that universities, government, corporations, startup accelerators, venture capitalists, their roles being united towards the common challenges. That's the main purpose really of ecosystem governance, if you like, because each actor fulfill a particular function for the ecosystem to be successful. Not a single actor can take on sustainability transition challenges by themselves. We need to work together, including laws and regulations, for instance. We shouldn't be bound by that societal institution. It must be developed dynamically as actors progress in their operations, so to speak. So I like that definition, Alysia, very much. And I would like to add also what I think are an additional actor type that it's the most important one, but it's so widespread in society, so we often do not see it. And that is the municipalities. That is each commune or smaller society. That's really the implementation layer of societal transformation. That's where it happens. And there you have other important functions or qualities in any innovation ecosystem. For instance, the engagement of civil society and citizen, it's at the municipality level. So I want to add that. And then finally, as I'm on the roll here, I would like to just appreciate the aspect that you bring forward, tech, the role of internationalization. My view is if Sweden completes the sustainability transition without strong international connections, then it's worth 100. But if we do the same transition with strong international connections and strong international collaboration where we can export our ideas, have a mutual exchange on them, and then work together on solutions that can be more widespread across the globe, then that sustainability transition is worth not 100, but 1,000. And if all countries think alike, we will have a very strong multiplier effect. So thanks for bringing that up, Tech. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Frederick. And I think by adding a few elements to government, academia, and industry, you mentioned civil society, which I think is also very important. So thank you for adding that as well. And if I go with one of the things you said, Frederick, which is each actor is important. Andre has his hand up, and Andre, as you give us your comment, Frederick said that each actor is important. And one of the words you used, Andre, is balance. There's a need to have a balance. And sometimes we have seen that, for example, there's a lot of excitement around startups and around unicorns, but other businesses are also important. Perhaps you can also touch upon this notion of balance and having balanced emphasis.
So I would like to come back to one element that seems to me quite important. If we look at the country represented today in the current discussion, we see that each of the countries that are quite innovative are very international indeed. So fundamentally not focusing on the domestic market, but being really champions in international cooperation. And to do that, you need to be balanced, open, and extremely agile, because in the international scene, you cannot just be static. Now, one element that in Switzerland we consider as extremely important is to not only, for example, consider startup or only consider large organization. We have one absolute key component in our economy, are SMEs. And what is extremely important is to consider that innovation is not just reserved for one category of entities. So a lot of people are just saying, oh, we need to have vibrant, startups. But at the same time, if you just are focusing on startups, you have numbers of existing companies that will just feel uncomfortable with what they can consider one point in time as unfair competition. So it's really extremely important to give the opportunity to, for example, SMEs to get access to academic research in a way that SME can be also extremely innovative. And if you look at one of the key components of an economy like Switzerland, is to have SMEs that are able to reinvent themselves with time. But taking now the example of startup, you have two approaches of startup. You have one startup as a foods for bigger company in the innovation chain, or you have startups that may become larger organization. And I think it's extremely important to be extremely open-minded, but also when we think about the ecosystem, to give the opportunity for startup to become SMEs and bigger company, as well as a possibility for SMEs to be thinking outside of the box and having international cooperation. And for that, you should not consider that everything is predefined, but to give the opportunity to be flexible in terms of cooperation. For example, if an SME finds that the best partner is in Singapore, to give the support in order to have this SME being able to not only think outside of the box, but also to think overseas. And that is one of our roles as InnoSwiss.
Thank you, Andre, and Tech, you have your hand up. And as you give us your comment, I'd like you also to touch upon one component in addition to what you're about to say. We've talked about the ecosystem, but I've always been very impressed with the way Singapore has always taken this whole of government approach to many of the challenges it faces, and has often had to engineer a lot of the dynamics that you need to have between the different parts of the ecosystem. Could you also, in addition, talk to that part as well?
Thanks, Omar. I must say, Alysia and Frederick has described, very comprehensively the many different components in the innovation ecosystem that exists in Singapore too over time as we build here. But what we see is the vibrancy in terms of entities working together. Doesn't seem to be happening as best as we want them to, right? I suppose Alysia is trying to use her networks to link people up. In Singapore, in the history of our evolution as a country, we welcome big companies. Some of them very, very innovative countries, top multinationals. We have over time built up very strong research institutions, top universities. Both of them work with the government very well because they actually receive grants from the government. But actually what we like to see, what we'd like to have happen is to see whether the corporates are able to work with the universities. So I always say that we are not as fortunate like the United States, where hundreds of companies are at the doorsteps of MIT to pull technology out, or even to pull the faculty out or the grad students out to work in their companies, to start companies. So in the usual Singapore fashion, we try to engineer schemes to catalyze, to facilitate, and to coordinate. And what we have seen is that we are seeing some positive outcomes of what we have done. So what are some of the schemes we have started? We did a corporate lab scheme. Instead of companies going naturally to the universities to set up laboratories, working with them, we actually facilitated a scheme that co-funded the companies in setting up a facility in the university. So that brings the corporates together with our university colleagues. In another scheme, we thought that we should form consortia, bringing our universities and institutes together with in the common areas of interest, and then bring the companies in a form of consortia, which then brings, for example, the airframe makers, Boeing, engine makers like Pratt & Whitney, GE Aviation, Rolls-Royce, and then the other parts of the industry ecosystem, and then partnering them with university ecosystems that are working in similar technologies, right? We have a photonics consortium now, we have a cybersecurity consortium now, and that seems to work quite well. in linking up not only the big companies, but also the SMEs and some startups in a tiered fashion, working with, what I call the research ecosystem. Right. So there's one dimension, and in some sense, people talk of the triple helix. That has not happened naturally in Singapore. And as you see, Omar, we actually engineered it. We try to bring these three strands together and twist them to make sure that they work together. We have some early successes. We see, for example, very vibrant partnership between applied materials and our universities, our research ecosystem, Rolls-Royce, Lloyd's Register, a whole gamut of companies. But I think our ambitions is to see whether our own local SMEs, as Andre said, how to actually prepare them to be receptacles of technology. And this is an ongoing work in progress for us, right? So there's one dimension. But, we also have ambitions to be a startup nation. And there, again, we have actually copied a lot of what they did in Israel, the technology incubation scheme, we actually have something called iJam, where, anybody have got an idea, come to us, we give them $50,000, right, to start a company. That actually, resulted in a lot of my auditors, being worried about, money being spent. But actually that has resulted in quite a few unicorns, as you call it, right? And we are quite pleased, right? So in retrospect, they say, we have some successes now, right? So, but for us, this whole innovation ecosystem is a work in progress. As I said, we are quite young, right? We are still engineering different schemes. But, coming back to the global ambitions that we have, Singapore is only got 5.5 million people. Market is so small. We have to look out to ensure that, companies can only prosper if they leave us. So we actually have global innovation alliances nodes all over the world. And we actually have provisions to host, foreign entities in Singapore. So we have a partnership with Australia, and we actually provide what we call a landing pad for the startups. So, in this way, we are able to reciprocate, even as we facilitate our startups going out, but also we have facilities to welcome, startups coming to Singapore in partnership with our local company. So maybe I'll stop there. I think, many of us actually speak in similar, have similar ideas and, describing the system that we have, but in a slightly different way because of our own particular situation that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Tech. And as I switch over to Alysia, she has her hand up to add. Alysia, as you add the comment you're about to add, I'd like you also to address, in addition to it, something that, even though Tech just said, we all have our own unique contexts, I do believe there is one similarity or one commonality between all of these ecosystems, and that they are fundamentally all fueled by talent. And I know that KTN has done an immense job surfacing talent and expertise as well. So if you could also address, to your existing comment, this evolving talent story in the UK and how you see this evolving talent story.
Thank you, Omar. That's a massive question. So I just wanted to follow up as well. I'll pick that up just to follow up on some of the points, because some really important points have come up. And Tech used the phrase, this is a work in progress, right? But it's always going to be work in progress. If you've got a great innovation system, it will always be a work in progress because it needs to be dynamic. So the first point I was going to say is we have talked here about academics. We've talked about big multinationals, big companies. We've talked about SMEs, startups, investors, right? All of those, and there's more, government, right? All of those different groups and individuals have different drivers. They have different challenges. And really importantly, they have different language and ways of speaking. So the first thing I would say from my experience personally on working internationally and across disciplines and with KTN is spending time listening and understanding your different communities is really important. It's not wasted time, because what we tend to do, all of us, if we're involved in funding, for example, we use our traditional mechanisms. We'll advertise some opportunity, we'll get people to come and bid in, and then we'll put some money out and everyone's happy. That doesn't work really. It's very transactional. So I would just really urge you, all of us, to spend time understanding the different communities. For example, the SME community. We often find SMEs are excluded from engaging with government, for example, because they're not big corporates. And they don't have the same time to invest on innovation funding, for example. So that's my first point, is really listen to the different communities and adapt what you do by learning and listening. The second point is, we talk a lot about tech and science. Well, I mean, I'm from that background, so obviously that's really important. A couple of people have already mentioned social sciences and humanities, and also talked about engaging society in the way that we develop challenges. I think that is absolutely critical, and I think we're really bad at doing it. When we talk about innovation, I don't mean we in the UK, I mean generally as across the globe, we love focusing on tech because it's much easier to describe. And I think if we're going to really achieve against our innovation goals, taking climate change as an example, net zero, we have to be thinking much more about society, about our communities. And then the third one builds on Frederick's. Well, a few people have talked about this as well, about local communities and global issues. So what we're thinking in KTN a lot about how we can work on a local scale, but also thinking about big global challenges. So marrying up the local efforts and bringing together local communities, but also tackling those big challenges. So Omar, on your point about talent, that's massive. So I think there's two levels to that. One is our own staff. So and the other one is the networks we work with. And when we introduced our new strategy, it was a year ago, we launched a new strategy. We had people at the heart of that. That was our underpinning area that we wanted to focus on as a business. And there's lots of elements we're looking at, including developing our own staff. But a key part of that is diversity. And it's how we make sure we are inclusive in the type of people that we bring into the organisation. And I don't just mean gender or race. I'm talking about the background, the philosophy, the type of people we bring into the organisation. And then I'll use the same theme as well for people and talent in our network. It's very easy to work with the people you're happy with, the people you're used to, the language you're comfortable with. We are really trying to challenge ourselves. How do you work with communities, rural communities? How do you work with the companies that aren't usually engaged with these type of discussions? How do you work with all the different marginalised parts of the system? So I think for me that's extremely important. It's really challenging how we bring new talent into the system. But there are lots of points there, but I had to get that across. But the talent one's massive, so thank you for raising that really important point.
Thank you, Alysia. And sticking with the talent bandwidth here, Frederick, what I've always found impressive about Sweden is the fact that even though there are a lot of welfare benefits in Sweden, and it's characterized almost as a welfare type of economy, yet people are willing to be innovative, and those barriers somehow were broken down in Sweden. Maybe you can give us some insight into what exactly happened that allowed Sweden to have such innovative mindsets.
I think, Omar, you are perfectly right in that we are strong in infrastructure in the wide sense of the concept. Including talents. We have had the luxury, you might say, of having long-standing and strong academic tradition in our country. And Sweden is also a good place to be. and we are reputed for having interesting organizations, interesting potential employers in our country. And that's all good, but international mobility is what we need to one extent. There is a competition for talents and all that. But I think that Sweden and many other countries as well can do better, because we also need to recognize that the competence that we develop locally and in our countries, that is a part of a global labor force with one mission really, and that is to support the sustainability transition across the globe. And that means competing for a kind of fixed talent asset is not the way to go. We need all to work to expand that knowledge asset of qualified labor and qualified working professionals. And Sweden can do that, and it can do it increasingly so. What we are strong at is higher education at the graduate level. What we are not so strong at currently is lifelong learning and competence development of working professionals. If we can add that capacity in our universities, then that actor type, universities in the innovation ecosystem, can fulfill their particular function for the Swedish and international ecosystem in a much better way. We would love to be in a situation where we develop and nurture talents in Sweden that can either work in Sweden, taking on duties to complete sustainability transition with added societal impact and added economic impact. We're fine with that, but we are also fine with people that have developed their competence in Sweden, work internationally to do similar duties there. And if we can have a similar mindset across countries, then we can expand the global knowledge asset needed to complete the transition. That's how I would view it, including some of the strengths that you precisely point out, Omar. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick, and we'll switch on to Andre with his views as well. And I do know that in Switzerland, talent is considered in a very considerate way, and excellence is very important at multiple levels. Please go ahead, Andre.
Thank you, Omar, and would like to give few extra comments to what Frederick just said. So one of the key elements, Switzerland has been always very open in terms of talent, both with incoming and outgoing talents. Now, having said that, as in a Swiss, one of the next steps that we consider is to give the opportunity for talent, existing talent within academia or within even SMEs to have the opportunity to work and to make experience outside of Switzerland. Because one element that we should always consider, it's not only to look at talent internationally, but to have part of our duty is to make our own talent being better. Now, one element that I would like to be interested to come back and to discuss is the question of what is making innovation agency in a way in an interesting body. So one thing that we see is that in universities, you have two types of funding. You have one that are grants that are pretty classical, and you have some competitive financing. And here, the innovation agency may make a difference because they create a real incentive for academia to work with other companies. And what is really important is to give a critical mass to allow SMEs to get access to new science, to new technology and new opportunities. And it's not only for science. And for example, all the elements that are in society, that are business model, that are elements where it's extremely important to give not only to SMEs the access to what is done the best, but also to create an incentive for the academia to work with external partners rather than just to be working within the academic community.
Thank you, Andre. That was very useful. And as we approach, I think, the closing minutes of this panel, I would like to invite each of the panel members. We have covered a lot, and it seems as though this 1 hour is definitely not sufficient to cover this conversation in a way that, yes, makes us feel full, that we've actually covered it adequately. Yet I think we've covered the notion of an ecosystem with multiple components, fueled by talent that we need to actually take care of at multiple levels. And perhaps starting with you, Tech, maybe we can have a closing statement about how you see the future of your innovation economy, the biggest challenge you want to overcome, and what's top of your mind as a parting thought.
I think critical for a small country, Singapore, it comes back to talent, right? With a talent base that we can build, then we can actually move forward with the visions that we have. And on that front, Singapore has got two broad strategies. One, to be able to attract the best to Singapore, and then to provide, the best opportunities to our own citizens. But beyond that, in line with what Frederick says, now that Singapore has certain key technology areas that we pride that we are competent and very good at, we're actually inviting, basically, scholars to come to Singapore, to join our research institutes, and then, to leave us to go back to our own country. So we are offering fellowships in, for example, in infectious diseases, in water technology and all this. In so doing, supporting what I call the global circulation of talent, right? Which we have benefited from. We continue to pride ourselves being an attractive place for talent. Now, having the talent base, then what we need to build is actually a much more vibrant innovation ecosystem so that we can address not only the challenges for industry, but also the challenges of society. So for us today, the challenges we face, common to everybody else, climate change, aging, for example, is a big issue. The environment, which is not confining only to the island of Singapore, but our neighbors, right? The marine environment that we're in because we're an island state. But we have to solve this from Singapore's perspective. And in doing so, we can then share with everybody else. We've always said that from Singapore's perspective, we do the little we can, and then we will share. But at the same time, we are most happy to collaborate with everybody else. But Singapore still lacks, many different elements of a mature innovation ecosystem, like what you see in California, what you see in Boston or London. But I think clearly for us, we have decided that we need to evolve ecosystem of our own character, with our own characteristic. And it will be quite different from London, it will be quite different from Boston, it will be quite different from California. But it will have elements of key partners we have with us. I would like to say that, one of our best partners is Etihad of Switzerland. We do a lot of things together with them in Singapore, and now together with them in Zurich, right? And this is the way we think we will advance. So I hope that, shares a little bit about our perspective of where we are heading to next. Thank you.
Thank you, Tech. Appreciate it. Alycia, some parting thoughts. What's top of your mind when it comes to the future of your innovation economy?
I think this is not just our innovation economy, it's all innovation. And I think it's reinforcing what we've all said, is moving from being competitive to being collaborative and keeping that mindset, at the forefront of everything we do. Because the connecting between us, whether that's across sectors, disciplines, countries, types of organizations, ecosystems, we have to be working together. So I think our key step for not just KTM for the UK, but for all of us, is to work together to have those shared challenges and to be really open and collaborative and all work together to connect the system in Qatar, in the UK, right across the whole globe. And thank you so much, Omar, as well today. It's been really interesting.
Thank you, Alysia. Frederick?
Thanks, Omar. Well, for starters, top of my mind is that it's very hard to stand out in this panel. The reason is simple. There are some key concepts exquisitely and nicely delineated. So thanks for letting me be here among these distinguished panelists. I should again try to complement what has already been said. And I think what has worked very nicely in recent years in Sweden is that entrepreneurs that do wonderful things start with very little, but have great plans. They are, in my mind, a vehicle that we all can kind of cling to and follow. We have, for instance, some very large startup companies now, battery production and green steel, climate neutral steel production. And with those examples, it's much easier for us as a funding agency or for the government as a legislating body. It's much easier to do all the things that normally is so hard to do. For instance, to align funding schemes in society across international, national, regional, local levels, altering abiding laws and jurisdiction, reduce fragmentation in ecosystems, stimulate mobilization of actors and display good examples, get international connections. So that's my addition. If you have those beacon kind of lighthouse entrepreneurial initiatives, they can be a vehicle for kind of bending the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Andre, with the final words from your end.
Thank you, Omar. I would just like to add first that we should not look at our past success as being the norm. We should think how we'll do the next step in order to remain very attractive and competitive. And now about international cooperation, some people may think that it's about competition. No, it's about being competitive in a way that together we can bring more than just alone. And personally, I just consider that we are here to help entrepreneurs and different entities to innovate more rather than just to compete between agencies. And we have much more to do together rather than just looking in our own house. So just a real incentive to do more together.
Thank you, Andre. And I think with that, we can say that the underlying concept or theme that seemed to have permeated all the discussion today is this importance of connectivity. And this is connectivity that's internal to your respective nations. And it's connectivity that's external to your respective nations. And to actually think about that in the context of the next few decades, what do these connectivities look like? How do we enhance them? How do we bring more people on board and make it easier? And how do we address different audiences, as Alysia also said, to be more considerate to these different audiences so that we can actually establish better connections, have healthier national ecosystems, and have greater international collaboration to solve the problems we are facing today. May they be COVID or may they be climate change. So as we continue to embark our journey here in Qatar and as other countries work towards developing an innovation-based ecosystem and economy, we must continue investments and support of our national ecosystems across all these actors, may they be universities or research institutes, private sector or public institutions. Thank you so much to the panel members and thank you to the audience. There have been a lot of questions and it does definitely feel like to answer them, we will need a part two to this discussion for us to adequately do that. So thank you to the panelists who can, if you could just wait a few seconds, we would like to take a group photo of you. So have a nice smile and we'll take a photo. And thank you to the audience for following this discussion. And we look forward to other parts to the Spotlight On series. So thank you, and thank you to the panelists. I do believe that my team has taken your photo, so thank you again, and I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Omar, and so lovely to meet other panelists. It's been a real pleasure.
And to be continued.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Visit Singapore.
Absolutely.